If you need to upgrade Juniper Junos operating system on routing engines in the MX product line, the 240, the 480, or the 960, and you also have redundant routing engines, stick around because we're going to go through how Juniper usually recommends that you upgrade Junos in dual routing engine scenarios. All right, so let's go. And before we get started, just wanted to say that I'm not just going to give you the steps to upgrade Junos. I'm going to also show you how to verify, troubleshoot, and monitor the process along the way. How to look at the states of the routing engines, how to verify the forwarding plane state, the PFE, how to look at the control plane and various protocols before and during and after the failover process. So hang in there, watch the video in its entirety, and hopefully much of this will be useful to you as you understand more about Juniper and dual routing engines. First, let's look at juniper.net, the website. If you go to Solutions, go to Product, Routers, you'll see a lot of their routers, and they're organized in their product family. You got the MX, the PTX, ACX, CTP, JRR, Juniper Smart Session, or Juniper Session Smart Router. I'm not even familiar with that. I wonder if they're changing the names on some of these. The SRX, Packet Optical Transport. So, and now you can jump back to the top. So I want to talk about the MX series. Okay, there's a bunch of them in the family. Click on this, it takes you to the page of MXs. Look at all of them. An extensive family of MX routers. And if you look at this one, and this one, they form a family of their own, as it's been called over the years, the MX 240, 480, and 960. They're very similar. They're switch control boards and routing engines and line cards are interchangeable. And here's the 960. And here is the 480. And here is the 240. Okay? So that's the ones that we're going to be talking about. I'm going to be upgrading Junos on the MX 960. And let's click on this to get a closer look. If you look at the 960, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to skip these 3. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 slots for line cards. Well, why did I skip these 3 in the middle? Well, the reason is because they are for switch control boards. All right, it's the switching fabric of the system. Now, if you look at the first 2, you can see there is a half-width module in the middle. I'm going to try to blow it up a little bit more. There we go. If I can get that chat with us out of the way, we'll just do that. So 1, 2, 3 switch control boards here in the middle, and my phone. And if you look at these first 2, they have half-width modules inside there known as routing engines. So that's where the routing engines are, and they form a master and backup relationship. All right? Usually the one in slot 0 of the routing engine slots, you have slot 0 and slot 1, and this would be slot 2 for the switch control board, but slot 0 and slot 1 form the 2 redundant routing engines. Slot 0 usually boots up first and becomes the master. Slot 1 usually boots up and becomes the backup. Now, if you see these ports on the bottom of each routing engine, they are a series of auxiliary console or Ethernet ports. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have console access, either directly or indirectly through a console server, you will be on these console ports to monitor the progress of the Junos upgrades. You can access the platform through SSH or Telnet, but ideally being on these console ports is the best scenario. You get to see the most when you're on the console ports. Okay, I'm showing you that I have an SSH session, which obviously is handled by the master routing engine. This is an SSH session. Now, these are local consoles that are achieved through a console server. I'm remotely accessing them through an IP addressable console server that puts me right on those console ports that I previously told you about. Okay, so obviously you can see I'm on the master console and I'm on the backup console of both of those routing engines in slot RE0 and slot RE1 respectively. If you're SSH'd in, you SSH into the master, and then you can see how your routing engines are arranged like so. Routing engine, slot 0 is master. I say how they're arranged. Which one is acting currently as the master? So we see slot 0 is the master. If we go further down, we see slot 1 is the backup. Okay? That's how you check that. I even like to shorten that command with the following. Grep, the word routing, pipe slot, pipe current. That's how you do a multi-field search. And this tells us that our routing engine status for slot 0 is the current master, routing engine status for slot 1 is the backup. So this is a nice way of seeing what I previously showed you in short form. If you're not fortunate enough to have these consoles like I do, go back to the, let's just go back to the SSH session, and I want to show you something. Request chassis, request routing engine login, question mark, other routing engine. And it logs you into the other routing engine. Look at that. We were on the master. We did a request routing engine login, other routing engine, and it logs us in to the other routing engine that's acting as the backup. Type exit, and it puts you right back to the master. Since we're going to be doing a Junos software upgrade on these dual routing engines, we're on the console. Show system information is a short way of seeing the platform and the version of Junos you're running. We are running 17.4R2-S1.2, and you can see on the master as well as on the backup, we're running the same version. If you're only on an SSH session, you could do what I previously showed you by doing show system information. You find out what it is on the master, you request login to the backup, and I'll copy and paste, do the same command. Let's exit out. Now we're back on the master. However, there's another nice way of doing this. Show version, invoke on all routing engines. Now this is going to give you a lot of output, but it shows you both routing engines. So I'll scroll back up. See this? Routing engine 0, the model and the version. Let's scroll down. Routing engine 1, the model and the version. So we could shorten that with grep. What were we looking at? RE, hostname, model, and Junos. Okay, let's look at that. RE, let's do a caret. It's the beginning of line. Caret hostname, caret model, caret, and we'll do Junos colon so it doesn't show all those other subcomponents of the version. And look at that. So now we can see by invoking on all routing engines, we can see what the version is on RE0 and RE1 right here in one nice output. Something else I want to make you aware of is the newer routing engines in the MX family are known as NGREs, next generation routing engines. They have a hypervisor virtual layer that is now being used, and you need to be aware of that. So the older way of running the software add command, request system software add, where you would add Junos software, is now request vmhost software add. Okay, the way that you can see the next generation routing engine is by adding the word model to our previous command that I was showing you, show chassis routing engine. We see the model is RE-S-2X00X6. I think that means 6 cores. I think they're Haswell core processors. Okay, so if you look this up online, that model, you will find in some Juniper documents, like this one right here, an MX960 hardware guide, that model number shows up right here. It says that that's the name in CLI output, but the model number of the processor is actually RE-S-X6 64 gig. There's also a 128 gig version. There you go. It's right here down below. Okay, and so we see that we have this version. Now, if you type show chassis hardware, I already have that output and I've removed the serial numbers to protect the innocent. Show chassis hardware, grep routing, it tells you that same model number that I just showed you in the show chassis routing engine output. But if you do show chassis hardware models grep routing, it'll then show you that other type of model name of the processor. All right, so these are those next generation routing engines, and you need to be aware that when you upgrade Junos, we need to do the vmhost upgrade command that I previously showed you. The way you look at the vmhost, show vmhost, status will show its current status, it's online. And if you want to look at both routing engines, invoke all, and it'll tell you the status of both routing engines. You can also look at show vmhost version, and there's two different sets, set P and set B, and you can also invoke on all routing engines, and it'll tell you both sets in both routing engines. Okay, a quick note on in-service software upgrade, ISSU. You might be thinking, well, you got two routing engines, and I know that with two routing engines, you can make use of some redundancy components like graceful routing engine switchover, nonstop routing, NSR. When you enable these things, then you can subsequently do an ISSU, an in-service software upgrade, and minimize the downtime and service interruption to your customers. And that's all well and good in theory, but a lot of folks will tell you, and I'm here to tell you, that when you do an ISSU upgrade, sometimes it's a mixed bag. Sometimes you get success, and I think more times, the majority of the time, you get strange results, and you wind up needing to fall back to just a typical single routing engine Junos upgrade, one at a time. Okay, so the command for ISSU, request vmhost software in-service upgrade, like that. That's how you would do an ISSU, but I'm going to recommend against it, and that's because of the results that I've had. But also, the Juniper TAC will often suggest or recommend against ISSU as well. They'll usually tell you to go ahead and do the routing engine upgrades one at a time. Sometimes they'll recommend you just turn off GRES and NSR and things like that. Turn those off momentarily. Upgrade the backup routing engine. Enable those redundancy options. Do a master switchover. Then do the new backup routing engine upgrade. Then you can fail those back over if you want to. But that's usually the recommended way of getting a consistent result when upgrading Junos. And one parting comment about ISSU, if you must do an in-service software upgrade, it'd be good to test it on a lab device to know that the version of Junos you're coming out of and the version you're going to, combined with all the hardware components that are in your chassis, how well do they play with ISSU, and to what degree will you have an interruption or maybe none at all? Again, it's a mixed bag with ISSU. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. And so you can do a check. I think there's a command where you can do a kind of like a dry run where you can check the compatibility of running the issu command, and it'll tell you what components are going to be supported or not. All right, so let's get on with this. So let's talk through that process real quick. If the current state is routing engine in slot 0 is the master and routing engine 1 is backup, first thing we want to do is copy the junos file to each routing engine. You want to put it in var temp /var/temp. We want to disable graceful routing engine switchover, NSR, and NSB, nonstop routing, nonstop bridging. Proceed with upgrading Junos on the backup routing engine with a reboot. So let the reboot occur when the backup routing engine is back up and running. Then do a master switchover to routing engine 1. Routing engine 1 will then be the new master. A note that with all the redundancy stuff disabled, the FPCs, the line cards, will reboot and you'll have a traffic impact. So do this in a maintenance window. All right. After the routing engine 1 becomes the master, now you can upgrade the new backup routing engine, which is going to be RE0, with a reboot. After the backup routing engine RE0 is done, you can now re-enable your redundancy protocols and wait for replication to occur. We'll go over that in a moment. Then you can leave the router as it is, or you can do a switchover to make the RE0 the master, if you like it that way. If you're OCD like that and you want to make sure your RE0 is left as master, fine. If not, RE1 functions as a sufficient master as well. All right, so that's the overall process that we are going to do. And you will recall we are currently running 17.4R2-S1.2, and we need to upgrade to 17.4R2-S10. So that is a different service release. We have S1, we need to go to S10 to overcome a problem report, a PR, which otherwise is known as a bug. And so we need to get this other version. So let's go to juniper.net, support, under downloads, go to MX, go to MX960, and here are all the different versions of Junos software for the MX960. I'll post in the comments or the cards, the pop-out cards, a little bit more about understanding the different versions of Junos software. But this, that's a previous video that I did, by the way. But this is where we are by default on this web page. We need to find 17.4R2, but we're going to need a particular service release. So click this drop down for Junos SR service release. Let's go to 17.4. Now, if you scroll up to the top, you will see that what is expanded is install media. Install media is what you would use if you're doing a USB install, using a USB stick and plug it into a USB port of a router. That's not what we're doing. So close this, hit this X to collapse install media. Open up install package, which is an over-the-network transfer, doing a secure copy or a FTP transfer of the file onto the var temp directory of the routing engine. All right, we're going to look for, I'll just do a find on S10. There we go. Make sure that you are under the install package. Okay, we are. So go back down, look for the hits on S10. Now look at all these different versions of S10 software. 32-bit, 64-bit, limited, vmhost, vmhost net. This is the one that we want. You want to get the vmhost 64-bit version. All right, so you'll click over here to download it. Okay, that file was 2.3 gigabytes. So now that I've got that downloaded, let's get that over to the routing engines. First, I want to show you how to verify what is in the var temp. File ls var temp junos. Look, if you hit tab, it auto completes. which means that's unambiguous. You could use an asterisk. Okay, that's in the local routing engine, and that's whichever one is acting as the master. But to be specific, you could say RE0 colon. That shows you what's in routing engine 0, and RE1 colon will show you the version that's in routing engine 1. These files are here from the previous upgrade that was done previously, and so I will upload the new file 17.4R2S10 to these locations. Once we upgrade later on, we can go back when we're confident that 17.4R2S10 is running sufficiently. We can then delete this old file from the previous version 17.4R2S1.2. Now, if you use details, you can see how big it is. Then you can verify that you have the same file in both locations, same size. And also, while transferring it, it's nice, you can use a refresh. Let's put 3 seconds on it, and you will begin to see the new file as it is being transferred over. I'm going to go ahead and start this copy. And there you go. So now you see I am copying R2S10, and it says .tgz.filepart. And we can see that the bytes are incrementing, so it is actively copying. By the way, if I didn't mention it, I'm doing a secure copy using the standard secure copy tool, winscp. And we're still waiting for this to complete. We're still seeing progress. Bytes are incrementing. Okay, it looks like it's finishing up here. And you should see this file change from file part to now it would be the completed file. Any second now. There we go. Shows that it's completed. And there we go. So we have the .tgz file in place, and we can proceed. So now we have the 17.4R2S10 file in routing engine 0. As we can see here, it's in routing engine 0, but what about routing engine 1? It's not there yet. So we want to have it in both places to do a upgrade on both routing engines. That's what's recommended. So if we file copy RE0 colon var temp, and let's copy and paste this file name here, and we copy it to RE1 colon var temp. Let's do that. And then we will check in a moment when it's complete. Okay, it is now complete. And if we look at file ls routing engine 0, more specifically routing engine 1, we will see that it's there. Let's look at the details. RE0, and we can compare to RE1, and we see the new file, the S10 service release. Byte sizes are the same. Also, I just want to circle back on something I said. This old file, I don't even think it's needed. I just left it there in case I ever needed to reload Junos in the current version that's already installed, that I have the file still there as like a spare tire. In case I ever needed to reload it, it's there. So what I mentioned earlier, when I upgrade to 4R2S10, and then it's running okay, I'll go ahead and delete this old one, and then I'll just leave my new spare tires in place, that file there, for the current version that I'm running. Okay, time to move on to disabling graceful routing engine switchover, NSR and NSB. The way I would do it, first of all, show configuration, display set, grep, grace, non. There you go. If you have graceful routing engine switchover enabled, that's what it's going to look like. There's nonstop routing. There's nonstop bridging. Let's copy this. Okay, I copied and pasted it into a notepad. I changed the sets with deletes. Let's paste that into the config. Show pipe compare shows our pending candidate configuration changes where we are removing that stuff. Commit check will tell us if it likes what it's about to do. All right, it checks out okay. Let's commit that. We just disabled our redundancy protocols. Now look at our command prompt. Previously, we always had the word master. Master, master. Now, when you hit enter, the word master is no longer there. Also, go to the consoles, hit enter. Look at that. The word master is gone. Previously, it was there. It is no longer there. Go to the backup. The word backup is gone. Okay, previously it was there. It's no longer there. So we have removed the redundancy mechanisms between the routing engines, and they both are operating in a sort of a standalone mode. Show chassis routing engine. It still shows that routing engine slot 0 is a master and routing engine 1 is a backup. But this is not the true routing engine redundancy that we had before. This is just a basic Juniper routing engine redundancy, and it's not as resilient as it is after you turn on the graceful routing engine switchover, NSR, and NSB. It still shows it as a backup, okay? So, but the failover capability is not near what it is when you enable the redundancy mechanisms, which is why you see the prompts don't show master and backup anymore. Okay, I'm going to show you a few things. First of all, we are moving on to upgrading Junos on the backup routing engine. Now, you don't know which one is absolutely the backup now because you no longer have that prompt. So on the consoles, you'll need to know which one is which, unless you know a few commands. Show system switchover is a command that is only able to be typed on a backup routing engine. Let's copy that command. Let's paste it into what is the master. Look at that. The command doesn't exist. Also, show chassis hardware is a command that is capable of being typed only on the master. Show chassis hardware. Let's hit enter. And it tells us this command can only be used on the master routing engine. So we know this console right here is definitely the backup routing engine. Okay, here's the command we're going to use on the backup routing engine. Request vmhost software add var temp junos, and then the entire name. You can hit autocomplete, but it won't autocomplete all the way through because there's another file in var temp, the old version. So you have to give it an unambiguous portion of the file name to autocomplete it. We'll do a no validate. We're going to do a reboot, and we're going to say pipe no more because sometimes pagination or paging will have a more at the bottom of the screen, and to stop the terminal from prompting for a space bar so that it continues the process, put it to pipe no more. All right, here we go. I'm going to hit enter, and now it's off and running. There's a little bit of signs of life, a verified Junos vmhost install message, a couple more messages there. Transferring Junos, transfer done. I'm pausing along the way so you're not staring at a screen. Okay, it's proceeding with the upgrade. A few more messages there. Okay, looks like we are at a login prompt. are still at the old version. Let's see what happened. Okay, so what happened there was right after issuing the request vmhost software add command, the routing engine in RE1 panicked. It went into a panic message and I had a lot of bad output. It looked like it rebooted and came back with the previous pre-existing version of Junos. So it did not successfully upgrade. So then you'll see in a moment, I proceed with the same attempt at at upgrading Junos, but then I use an RE1 option to be specific to upgrade RE1. So I don't know if it was a glitch in the routing engine, but you'll see that it's successful in a moment. Here's the command we're going to use. Request vmhost software add var temp and the file name, no validate, RE1 reboot, pipe no more. So the pipe no more will turn off paging. RE1 is where we want to install it. So you have two options, RE0 or RE1. And let's give this a go. Okay, there's some messages that it's proceeding. A few more messages. It says it's testing. Uncompressing. 17.4 R2S10. While the backup is upgrading, look what we see. Master in slot 0. Slot 1 says present, but it does not say backup. Okay, so you can keep watching that. Now we have a command prompt for login. Let's go back over here on our SSH session where we are on the master routing engine. And now we see that the slot 1 routing engine is now in backup status. Not just present, but it is backup. So let's log into it. And we see that it has been upgraded to 17.4 R2S10. Very good. And if we look at the master and we show version invoke on all routing engines, we now see that routing engine 0 is still 4R2S1 and routing engine 1 is 4R2S10. So now we need to proceed with switching the mastership. Is that our next step? After R1 becomes master, okay, wait, backup is, now we need to do the mastership switchover, so let's do that. And I'll remind you, with redundancy protocols turned off, a switchover will result in a outage of the line cards. Show chassis FPC on the master shows the two line cards, 0 and 3 slots. And let's do that. Request chassis routing engine master switchover. You can do a check if you want. No confirm. Let me set the screen width. So request chassis routing engine master switch check no confirm tells us that the standby routing engine is not ready for a graceful switchover. Traffic will be interrupted while the packet forwarding engine is reinitialized, which is basically reinitializing these line cards. All right, so let's do that. Let's just say no confirm, and here we go. So you get messages on the consoles of both, which is why it's so nice to be on the console. This one relinquished mastership, and this one took over as master. There's the messages that are still going through it. Protocol mastership. You see chassis mastership messages. And the SSH session is probably going to be lost, is my guess. It's locked up, which I think it's probably on its way to being disconnected. Here we go. Complete. The other routing engine becomes the master. So let's go over to that. Show system switchover, remember, was a command that's only allowed to be typed on the backup routing engine. Show system switchover. So there we go. We know that is now the backup. Show chassis routing engine. And we see that slot 0 is in fact the backup, and slot 1 is now the master. So now we can go over to slot 0, since it is functioning as a backup, and I was going to say we could go over to slot 0 and start the upgrade, but I want to show you something real quick. Show chassis FPC. Okay, can only be done on the master. Show chassis FPC. All right, so you see that the line cards are present, and this is what is meant by the packet forwarding engine is going to be restarted. When you don't have redundancy protocols turned on, graceful routing engine switchover and things like that, you don't maintain your forwarding plane in the face of the control plane restarting. Okay, so we see the line cards are present, but they're not fully booted yet. Show OSPF neighbor. We don't have OSPF neighbors. Previously, this router had a network neighbor state with another router, and so that's not happening because our forwarding plane is down and our line cards are down. Show interfaces, terse. Let's do this. The type of line card we have only has XE and ET style interfaces. The MPC 70 MRATE module. And so let's grep for that. So line cards are not up yet, nor are interfaces. Well, there we go. Line card 3 is on its way to being up. That's a services module. But line card 0 is not. That's what's going to have our revenue ports. All right. We're getting a little closer. Now we have numbers in here, and it says online. There you go. Slot 0 is online. You have all zeros for data for the line card. Still zeros. It takes these line cards a few minutes to fully boot. We now have some numbers in there for CPU utilization and things like that. There we go. There's our interfaces now. XEs and ETs. Show OSPF neighbor. Two-way, so we're waiting for OSPF to go full state. And so, yeah, I just wanted you to see that the forwarding plane does restart. And these are some of the indicators that it's on its way to coming back up. So now we can get over here to RE0 and proceed with the software upgrade on that routing engine. So I'm making notes in our instruction file, and now after RE1 becomes the master, we can now proceed with upgrading the new backup routing engine, which is RE0. Change to RE0 option. So you'll see in the previous command for request vmhost software add, it was RE1, and make sure you change that to RE0 for this command. Also make sure show chassis routing engine. Make sure the one you're about to do is in fact the backup. Okay, slot 0 is the backup. There's the command. And here we go. It is proceeding with the upgrade. There's some messages there. More progress. Looks like it's rebooting following the upgrade. Okay, RE0 is now complete. We are at a login prompt. And it has 17.4R2S10, so this is good. Hey, I want to remind you that during the upgrade process, do not provide any input to the keyboard. If you hit the space bar or hit an enter key or something like that at certain points while the routing engine is booting up, you could stop the boot sequence. So be careful. All the screen status messages that you were seeing was just me showing you points along the way during the upgrade process. Okay, so it's request vmhost software add. You hit enter, you let it run its course until you get to the login prompt here. So this is good. We now have upgraded both routing engines. If we do the show version, invoke all routing engines, we see RE0, 17.4R2S10, RE1, 17.4R2S10. So this is good. Let's get back to our instruction file. We need to enable the redundancy mechanisms again. Okay, so let's put this back in here. Put the word set. And I'm going to show you something in preparation to this. The show system switchover tells you if the backup routing engine is ready for stateful, or excuse me, for switchover, for graceful routing engine switchover. Show task replication on the master tells us if replication was enabled and at what point in the process have the protocols replicated themselves. All right, so you will see that once we enable these redundancy mechanisms, that this will run its course and show chassis routing engine. We see that slot 0 is in fact the backup. So let's proceed with this. We're configuring the master, turning on GRES, NSR, and NSB. Now we have the prompt. It says master now, and let's go over here to the backup. If you hit enter, now it says backup. Show system switchover. It is ready. Graceful switchover is on. Ready, ready, ready. So all the things have replicated. Let's see what the master is showing. Well, MPLS is still in progress. And let's give it a moment to complete. Another command, request chassis routing engine master switch check. Switchover is ready. Show task replication is now complete. All right, so all the protocols that are able to be nonstop routed and GRES enabled are in fact ready to go. I think GRES is the forwarding plane. NSR is the ability for these protocols to fail over. So it looks like we are ready to fail this thing over. And I want to show you something else. So show OSPF neighbor, show LDP neighbor, show BGP summary. So we have established protocol neighbor states, show chassis FPC. This is our line card status. 0 and 3 are online, and I want to show some CGNAT sessions. before doing this switchover. So let's go ahead and do this switchover now. No confirm. Okay, it's switching over mastership. And I'm going to show the OSPF neighbor state on the new master. Over here is the new master. Still waiting for it to calm down a little bit. There we go, it's the master. Show OSPF neighbor. If we look at details, says neighbor has been up for 45 minutes. Look at that. So it did not even go down. Show BGP summary. We still have 2 established sessions that have been up for, well, interestingly, those flapped. Show LDP neighbor. They usually don't, by the way. The LDP neighbor's been up for 46 minutes. Show service sessions count. And we still have some CGNAT sessions as well. I am looking at a ping on another screen, and I barely dropped a ping. So show chassis FPC. So things fell over pretty good. Even though the module says it's in testing mode, it's still supporting CGNAT sessions. So I just wanted you to see that. Now it's online. Okay, so this is good. Everything's failed over. Let's look at the current state. Show chassis routing engine. And now slot 0 is the master. Okay, so we pretty much got it back to the way it was before with the Junos upgrade. At this point, the router is serviceable and up and running on its new version of Junos on both routing engines. Replication is turned back on between the routing engines and everything is good to go. You can walk away from it at this point. But I'm going to show you a few other things before we get done here. Checking alarms to make sure everything's okay. Show chassis alarm. Show system alarm. If you would have left the routing engine as master in slot 1, you would have a message here that says backup routing engine is has failed over or something like that. The fact that we put it back to its default state clears that routing engine backup failover alarm. It's a minor alarm. It's just letting you know that the non-default routing engine is acting as the master. But again, since we failed it back over to its natural state, then you don't have that alarm. Another thing, remember we talked about removing some of the previous files in var temp, and let's look at that. Excuse me. So at this point, we really don't need to be on the consoles. We can go back over here to the SSH session. Well, if it was still active, I just lost it. Okay, there's the SSH session. File ls re0 var temp junos asterisk and re1. Okay, so we are running 17.4R2S10. That's what we have upgraded both routing engines to. So let's get rid of this old file. File rm for remove var, excuse me. Let's just do it like this. File remove re0 and the old 4R2S1 file. Okay, it just got rid of it. Let's do the same for routing engine 1. Okay, let's look at what we have. We now have one Junos file in RE0 and one Junos file in RE1. Both of them are S10. So we have cleaned up the previous Junos file that we no longer need. I'll just add, if you want to give it some time to percolate, to run in the wild and give it a few days or a few weeks to get comfortable that 17.4R2S10 is going to be satisfactory to you with your protocols and features that you're running, then you may not want to delete that previous version. Okay, that way you could, if it's still there in var temp, you can roll back to it. you can rerun an upgrade using that same file, which is basically a downgrade. Okay, so you might not want to be too quick to get rid of that. It wasn't doing any harm by it being there. And so I have seen routing engines where it seems like when there was an issue and they got rebooted or something like that, they have went back to a previous version, and I'm not sure if it was because the file was in vartemp or if it was because it was one of the previous versions in the show vmhost version of the P and the B locations. So anyway, the fact is if the file's there, you can use it to roll back to later on if you need to. And so, but once you get comfortable with the version you're on, then you can go ahead and get rid of it. Hey, that's all I got for this video. I hope this was helpful in you understanding more about upgrading Junos in a dual routing engine scenario in the MX product family, particularly the 240, the 480, and the 960. This was the 960 that we went through. And so if you like it, if you like what you're getting from this channel, subscribe, turn on notifications so that you know when I drop new videos, and share it with somebody that you think might benefit as well. All right, I look forward to the next one. Thank you.